Namaskar and a very warm welcome to everyone joined in today on our 58th Know Your Species, Know Your Zoo talk. This talk is being organized by the Central Zoo Authority, New Delhi, as part of the ongoing Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav. The Mahotsav is a 75-week-long celebration to commemorate 75 years of India's independence, which falls on the 15th of August 2022. The Central Zoo Authority is taking this celebration forward through a massive outreach campaign entitled Conservation to Coexistence, The People Connect. Under the helm of this campaign, we will be showcasing 75 conservation priority species and 75 zoos, highlighting one species and one zoo each week. We are currently in week 58 of this celebration with the Himalayan black bear as the species in focus and the Renuka Zoo as the zoo in focus. So joined in today to speak to us on this species is Dr. Neema Manjrekar, who is a wildlife biologist and conservationist. So Dr. Neema has done her post-graduation and doctorate from the Wildlife Institute of India, Dehradun. Her master's dissertation was on the feeding ecology of the black bears in Dachigam National Park, Jammu and Kashmir. And she has since worked on different species in the Himalayan ecosystem, namely the target and the Asiatic ibex. Her work has also encompassed documenting the traditional medicine system practiced by local healers in Spiti, Himachal Pradesh. Apart from fieldwork, Dr. Neema has co-authored two children's books on wildlife and has written guides to wildlife areas of Karnataka. She's presently working as a freelance scientific editor and filmmaker for wildlife-centric themes. She will speak to us today more on the species in focus. So over to you, ma'am.
Thank you. And I'm Neema Manjrekar. Good afternoon. And thank you to CZA for giving me this opportunity to talk about the Asiatic black bear today. And thanks to Arundhati for coordinating it. And I think it's a wonderful initiative that CZA has undertaken to create awareness about many of the little known species in India, as well as many of the zoos that people have never heard about. Thank you. So should I start sharing my presentation?
Yes, ma'am. Please go ahead.
Okay. So today, as you can see, I'll be talking about the Asiatic black bear. It's Ursus tibetanus, which I studied for my MSc dissertation long ago. The Asiatic black bear is one of the small bears of the world, and it's around 140 to 200 centimeters long and with a very short, inconspicuous tail, maybe about 10 centimeters. And when it stands on all fours, it's less than a meter high. The males are larger than the females and can weigh between 80 to 175 kgs, while the females maybe around 50 to 120 kgs. And they're known to live about 20 to 25 years in the wild. They have a very thick, shiny black coat with a white V-shaped mark on the chest, which is typical for this species. This is absent in the similarly sized American black bear, this white V-shaped mark. And the ears of this bear are relatively large and round, can be quite easily visible when you spot a bear in the wild. Overall, this species is similar in size and habits to the Asiatic, to the American black bear. And another Indian black bear in the Himalayas is the brown bear, which in some other areas is also the supposedly dangerous grizzly bear. But these bears live at higher altitudes than the black bear, and they're larger. The black bear, in this picture, you can see they have really large claws, which helps them to make them the expert climbers that they are. They need to climb into the trees to get at food, usually the fruits of the trees. And coming to the distribution of the Asiatic black bear. The westernmost distribution is some patchy places in Iran where they are found. But it doesn't seem to be viable populations because they're so small and unconnected populations. Then there are some in Pakistan and Afghanistan, and a more continuous distribution along the Himalayas from Jammu, Kashmir, Himachal, Uttarakhand, and into Nepal, Bhutan, Sikkim, and all over the northeast, all over northeast India. And it extends down into Burma, Thailand, Vietnam, and eastwards into South China. And then also eastern Russia and Korea, there are a few populations, and separate populations in the southern islands of Japan. So their habitat consists of mostly broadleaf or coniferous forests in mountainous areas. In India, they are found mainly between 1,000 and 3,000 meters altitude, but they can also go up to 4,000 meters. So all along, as I said, all along the lower Himalaya in Jammu, Kashmir, Himachal Pradesh, and Uttarakhand, and in the northeast, they are found in the hilly forests there, but also at lower altitudes than in the western Himalaya. Unfortunately, not many studies have been done in India on the black bear, and those few that have been done have been either short-term studies like mine or just distribution surveys. Most of the detailed ecological studies come from Japan, where they've studied all aspects of ecology, from long-term feeding studies, conflict studies, ranging studies, and even DNA studies and other kind of genetic studies that they've done come from the Japanese black bear. So part of my MSc dissertation, I studied the feeding habits of this bear in Dachigam in Jammu and Kashmir, and a colleague of mine did a simultaneous study on habitat use. The earliest study on black bears in Dachigam comes from Schaller, but that was only a 2-week study in October in 1969. Our study in Dachigam was between May and October, and that is the most important time to study the bears when they are active. We only missed out the part that Schaller has covered in October, and the rest of the time anyway they are not active and there's no food available for them. You know, bears hibernate, so they go into a den, especially in places with snow. They stay for 4 or 5 months in their den, and even the females even have their young ones while they're in the den. In places like in the northeast, where it's not so cold and where they live at lower altitudes without snow, they don't need to hibernate. So if there is food shortage, then they might go into hibernation. Otherwise, they'll continue feeding throughout the winter also. So coming to Dachigam National Park, this is such a beautiful place. It's this lovely green valley, just close to Srinagar, just 21 kilometers from Srinagar, very easily accessible by road, and lovely forests within the valley, and on the sides, one side there's a conifers forest and the other side there are some grasslands. So this park, it was actually started getting protection in 1910 when Maharaja Hari Singh decided to protect it as a hunting reserve for himself and his friends. So he planted lots of trees and other plant species so that bears and the other species that is famous in Dachigam, the Kashmir red deer, the hangul, to protect them in that area and use it as a hunting reserve. So Dachigam is divided into upper and lower Dachigam based on the differences in vegetation. Lower Dachigam is a smaller piece. It's 26 square kilometers, and the rest of around 110, 115 square kilometers comprises upper Dachigam. Lower Dachigam has mainly the broadleaf forests, and upper Dachigam the conifers and the alpine vegetation above the tree line. So most of the black bears are confined to lower Dachigam because that's where their food is available. Upper Dachigam has a few bears in the coniferous forests, and then they have in the alpine grasslands brown bears also. And Dachigam is actually also one of the reasons for protecting it is also that it is the catchment area of the famous Dal Lake outside Srinagar. And there's such lovely rivers and streams, crystal clear water running through the park. It's a really beautiful experience to walk through Dachigam. And I did this study over 30 years ago, so you'll have to excuse me for the outdated data, and also I won't be able to present lots of colorful graphs and tables because I didn't have access to them. So anyway, and so we studied black bears in lower Dachigam, where the density is very high since food sources are concentrated here. They also have access to orchards and agricultural fields just outside the park. So I studied diet. So as carnivores, you would expect them to eat much more meat and animal-based foods, but actually bears are more vegetarian and particularly eating fruits. And as in also seen in the American black bear, the diet changes seasonally. What we saw as soon as they come out of the hibernation after winter, they eat insects. They turn over rocks and look for insects. Or if they find some wasp nests in the tree trunks, they raid those also. And then in spring, as sprouting of the vegetation begins, they start eating the fresh leaves. Both insects and leaves, young leaves, they're high in protein and very important to build up body condition after the hibernation where they've lost a lot of weight. And after that, soon the fruits start appearing. So throughout the summer, there are different kinds of fleshy fruits, and that is when the bears have a really good time feeding. The most of the activity anyway is feeding. They come out. Some of the bears we used to see during the day, but very few, and then more in the evening and early in the morning. So they feed through the night also. So in summer they eat the fleshy fruits like cherries and mulberries and peaches and apples and those kind of things. And once those are over, the fat-rich fruits start appearing. And these are the acorns from the oaks. The oaks are actually planted by the Maharaja. There are plantations within Lower Dachigam, which have a huge yield of fruits. So in the autumn, we see the bears concentrated mostly in those plantations. And diet throughout the year, it's supplemented by insects. Whenever they can find some insects, they are glad to have them. And if they can steal from some carcass that maybe a leopard or so has killed, then they eat that also. So coming to methods that I used for collecting my data, most obvious would be to directly observe them. You go out and see when they're feeding, what they're feeding on. And then if once they're gone, you look at feeding signs on the plants to check what they've been feeding on. Another method is the fecal analysis. You study the fecal matter or the poop of the bears. Here you can, on the right, you can see this pile of bear poop, where the fruits, many of the fruits are still full, others are seeds, so it's very easy to identify what they've eaten. So, and then to compare how much they've eaten of the different species, I even had to study the phenology of the fruiting plants to see when what is in fruit and how abundant each fruiting species is at that time. From that, one can determine if they prefer a species or not. So coming to the analysis, I tried the direct observations, but I got very, very little data. mainly because if you go out and look at the bear eating, you have to get as close as possible. And if you did that, they would suddenly realize they were being watched and then crash into the bushes and run away. And feeding science would also be difficult. For example, if I would want to, like this bunch of fruits, I would want to go and see how much they've eaten. I wouldn't know how much there originally was. So to quantify it would be very difficult. So finally, I had to rely on fecal analysis, and which has been shown to be most reliable in other studies of bears. And being carnivores, as I showed you in that picture of the feces of the bear, they have a short digestive tract, and so they're unable to digest the plant matter. So it comes out just like a fruit pulp. And from the fecal analysis, which I relied on for my analysis, I found 22 food items, which included leaves, fruits, insects, and other animal matter. So throughout the active period, that is when I was there, that was between May and October, I found that they ate over 20% of leaves and more than 70% fruits and only around 2% of animal matter. And among the fruits, 7 items constituted more than 80% of the overall diet. So, and as I said, seasonally also the diet changes, and dominant foods in different seasons. In spring, it is mostly foliage or leaves, which constitute almost 75% of the diet. Whereas in summer and autumn, fruits constitute almost 100% of the diet in some of the months. And here in Dachigam, 4 major wild species made up the bulk of the summer and autumn diet. There were the cherry, mulberry, wild meaning wild in the sense of that they are growing there naturally and not, they were growing there, but had been planted earlier by the Maharaja, which was long, long ago. So there's cherry, mulberry, acorns, and walnut. And apple orchards outside the park. These were raided in the summer. So, and also remains of peach and maize that they got from agricultural fields outside the park, I found in the scats. And what I found was that from when I compared with the phenology study, that fruits are eaten in proportion to their availability. So these bears can be called opportunistic feeders. They eat what is available at that time. And insects, as I said, made up less than 2% of the diet. And traces of mammal bone and hair were very, very rare. Once we found that the bears were feeding on a hangul carcass, probably killed by a leopard. So some hair of the hangul and some bones were found in the scat. But otherwise, we didn't find any animal remains in their scats. So over the active period when they are feeding, it starts with insects, which you can see here, these huge rocks. You see them just all over the place. You see upturned rocks. And that will have been done by the bears to get the insects that are underneath. And then when small herbs start sprouting, this is a herb called chirophyllum. It's related to our coriander. And that was one of the favorites during the spring before the fruiting season. And later there was this cherry. That was a big favorite. And cherries continued for 3 or 4 months. And in between there were mulberries. So when there were mulberries, they were eating almost only mulberries. And then they went back to the cherries. And in between they went to feed on apples and maize and local cherries grown outside also. And when all these fruits were over in the autumn, say August, September, that is when they started eating the acorns. This is the oak fruits, and walnuts. Walnuts, they used to actually climb up into the tree and just take the whole fruit in the mouth, and the outer green covering they used to spit out and crush the walnut and swallow it. So what we used to find in the fecal matter was the shells of the walnuts. So that was about the diet of the bears. And Dr. Satyakumar and Anwaruddin Chowdhury did a survey of bears all over the bear range in India. And they estimated between 5,400 and 6,750 bears to be in India. And not only in protected areas, but also in areas outside. They found also that black bear habitat is being lost to human encroachment and agriculture, which is a big problem. And as soon as this happens, there's a lot of conflict also. So people get killed, as well as bears get killed in retaliation when they raid the crops. Another big problem to bears is that they're being poached for trade in bear parts, mainly the bile that is used in Chinese medicine. So there's a great demand for bear bile in China, and they even have farms where they apparently take bile out. But people believe that wild bile is more potent, and that is a problem that needs to be addressed when protection is given to these bears. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Neema, for sharing your knowledge on the species in focus for today's week with special reference to its diet. We will take question answers for this session at the end of the talk. We now move on to the Know Your Zoo part of today's Know Your Species, Know Your Zoo talk. So joined in today to speak to us on the zoo is Mr. N. Ravi Sharma, who is the TFO Wildlife and the officer in charge of Renukagi Zoo. Mr. Ravi is Indian Forest Service officer of the 2019 batch, Himachal Pradesh cadre, and has a background in electronics and communication from NIT Calicut. And post joining the service, he has been in charge of the Wildlife Division of Shimla and the Himachal Pradesh Forest Department. And he will speak more on the zoo in focus. So over to you.
Good evening. I hope I'm audible now.
Yes, you're audible.
Yeah. Can you see my screen?
I can see now I can see it. You can just put the slide presentation in the background. Great.
Yes. Yes. Good evening, all. So I'm very happy to represent Renukagi Mini Zoo today. And thank you to CZA once again for giving this platform to the celebration of Asiatic Amrit Mahotsav. So today I'll be talking about Renukagi Mini Zoo, which is a zoo located in the Sirmaur district of Himachal Pradesh. And this particular zoo is categorized as a mini zoo as per CZA guidelines. And talking about the zoo in particular, this zoo is a representation of Shivalik Himalayan fauna. And in this regard, it is quite different from other zoos in Himachal Pradesh, which showcases the high altitude Himalayan fauna, like, for example, the Kufri Zoo, the Himalayan Nature Park Kufri. So, talking about the history of Renukagi Mini Zoo, so this particular mini zoo was established as a rescue center for strayed animals back in 1957. Then the Lieutenant Governor visited the Renukagi Zoo, and he ordered to arrange a female cheetal for pairing, and this laid the foundation for establishment of Renukagi Zoo. And subsequently, during the next few years, herbivore species were added, and finally, it was recognized as a mini zoo by Central Zoo Authority. And the unique features of Renukagi Mini Zoo is that it is probably one of the only lakeside zoos in India. And it is located just beside the Renukagi Lake, which is also a Ramsar site. And that is of extreme international importance from cultural aspect as well as ecological aspects. This particular lake is also home to a variety of migratory birds like the mallard, the moorhen, and a variety of other birds that occupy the lake, especially during the winter seasons. And this zoo has two main flagship species. The one being the species in focus today, Himalayan black bear, and the other being the Barasanga or the swamp deer. And talking about the animal collection plan that we have right now at Renukagi Mini Zoo, in herbivore species we have a variety of deer species like the barking deer, the sambar, the spotted deer, and the bharasingha or the swamp deer. And coming to the carnivores, we have the leopard, and we have the species in focus today, the Himalayan black bear. Once upon a time, Renukagi Zoo was also famous for the lion safari and the number of lions that it had housed. But due to several issues, the lion population in the zoo perished. And currently, we have plans underway to have a tiger enclosure and tigers brought in through exchange programs. So, this is the proposed animal collection in which we are currently looking to add certain species. The main species being the Royal Bengal tiger, and this is as per the approved master plan of CZA. And in herbivore species, we are planning to add the black buck and also add numbers in the spotted deer and hawk deer. And in the small carnivores, we are looking to add leopard cat, and we already have enclosures ready for the small carnivore species. This is the master layout plan of Renukagi Zoo, sorry. And as you can see, this particular zoo is along the perimeter of the lake, and various enclosures are scattered. And this has a great experience for the visitor in regard that it is also a walk around the lake and also a walk to the zoo enclosures and the various animal enclosures. So this particular master layout plan is also approved by CZA, and this is the organizational unit of management under which Renukagi Mini Zoo is managed. So the wildlife wing of HP is the overall body that manages the zoos and pheasantries in Himachal Pradesh. And this particular zoo is managed under Shimla Wildlife Division. And there is also a society, the HP Zoo Conservation Breeding Society, which is established for the management of all zoos in Himachal Pradesh. And this particular society, through this particular society, we have recruited a number of animal attendants and other workers who are able to work for the zoo and provided remuneration. So various trainings or skill upgradation are provided to staff in terms of exposure visits, in terms of training for rescue, for animal handling and various other aspects. Apart from this, the feeding of animals in Renukagi Mini Zoo, we have two separate feed stores. One for the carnivore section, that is for the bear and the leopard, and other feed store is near the herbivore enclosures for the herbivores. We have also prepared diet charts for different animals as per seasons, and this is enforced at the ground level. Regarding the biosecurity or sanitary protocol, we generally have foot baths, especially in the night sheds and in other places where there is some kind of movement of service personnel, so that there is no threat of infection or any spread of diseases to the animals. And also, we have annual health checkups or vaccinations that are done as per the protocol. We also conduct various zoo education and outreach activities. Uh, Usually, we do it in coordination with the schools at the ground level. We have celebration of the Wildlife Week or the Wetland Week, which usually happens during October and February. And we organize certain competitions so that there is wildlife awareness and education that is enriched in the youth and kids. And uh, the zoo walk with kids are usually conducted along with the biologists and the forest guards, so that the school students also gain some insight and knowledge about the various aspects of Shivalik Himalayan fauna. And coming to the amenities for visitors, we have battery vehicles in Renukaji Mini Zoo. It being a very scattered zoo and a long zoo path, uh, we have this facility of battery vehicle and also of cycles that visitors are utilizing, and they're finding it very helpful. This is also a souvenir shop at Renukaji Mini Zoo, so that visitors coming to the zoo can carry some memories of the lake and of the zoo along with them. So vision going forward is that we make some valuable additions in the animal collection plan, given it is a mini zoo. The main among them is to bring the Royal Bengal tiger and to complete the tiger enclosure. And of course, Renukaji Mini Zoo should be evolved as depicting the Shivalik Himalayan fauna. And one of the main aspects that we're looking into is also the construction of a new veterinary hospital at the zoo campus for treatment of animals. And the souvenir shop, we are also planning to operationalize it through a revenue sharing model. And there is also an aviary at the start of the zoo, which needs to be relocated and revamped as per existing guidelines. So we are looking to build a walk-in aviary that will give the visitor a good idea of the various pheasants and other birds in the state. So this comes to the end of the presentation. So thank you everyone for listening.
Hey, thank you so much, Mr. Ravi, for sharing an overview of the Renuka Zoo. We now move on to question and answers for today's session. So, Dr. Neil, we will take questions for the species section first. So, are you with us?
Yeah, and yeah.
All right. So, ma'am, the first question for you is that is any information available on the breeding ecology of the Asiatic black bears? And if yes, what is the mating system like? Are they monogamous?
No, they are not monogamous, but there hasn't been any detailed study of them. But I assume they'll be similar to the American black bear. Yeah.
All right, ma'am. And the next question for you is that do the Asiatic black bears hibernate during winters, or do they show any longitudinal migration when there is a seasonal shift?
I mentioned that I think in my talk that in the areas where there's lots of snow and food availability is restricted in winter, that's where they hibernate. They usually go into a den, but if some food is available, they come out and have. But usually in very heavy snowfall areas, there is nothing available for them. So they go into their dens. There's still whether it's real hibernation because they're too big to hibernate and bring down their body activities to very low. So maybe it can be called torpor, where they just sort of deep sleep. And they even have their young ones during the, even in Dachigam, the young ones are born in the dens. And then they lactate while they're in the dens and then come out when cubs are maybe 2-3 months old. And in areas like in the Northeast where food is available throughout the year, where there's less snow in the lower areas that they occupy, there they usually don't need to hibernate because they have a source of food.
Right, ma'am. And ma'am, the next question for you is that you mentioned poaching as one of the threats that the species faces in its distribution range. Do you think community involvement and engagement can help reduce the impact of this?
Yes, surely. Communities have to be involved to have any impact on reduction of poaching, because it's usually the local people who are taken as the guides to do such things. So
Right.
community has to be involved.
Okay, ma'am. And the next question for you is that several zoos are housing and displaying Himalayan black bears. What special features do you think that zoos can focus on to augment awareness about the species and the different habitats that the black bears occupy?
I think they need to, in the enclosures, they would have to have some trees where they can climb, even if they're not really fruiting trees, but trees to climb on, and resting place, some den or a rocky outcrop under which they can lie. And, these are I think two main things that are required in an enclosure for bears.
Right, ma'am. And the last question for you is that the Himalayan black bears are prone to obesity in captivity. So, what would you recommend to this end?
Diet control, probably they need to have a very balanced diet because they're not moving around too much also. So like in the wild, they can't be eating all the time. They probably have to have a very balanced diet. And because in the wild, especially areas like Dachigam, they are hibernating for 4 or 5 months. So they need to build up the body condition, which is not so in zoos. Yeah.
Right, ma'am. So I think those were the questions for you. And we now move on to questions for so Mr. Ravi. The first question for you is that what plans does the zoo have for like conservation priority species such as the Himalayan black bear with reference to programs planned? I think you've mentioned it in your one of your slides, but if you could reiterate a bit about that, okay, in terms of say conservation priority species that the zoo has, what are the kind of programs that you are organizing for education awareness and community outreach?
Yes. So for community awareness and education, we usually have these guided walks, particularly involving the local community, the school children, and the youth in and around the locality, and also wildlife enthusiasts from all around. So we conduct such guided zoo walks, and we also conduct certain competitions uh, for children, so that wildlife awareness and education is built in them from a young age. And apart from that, you question about the conservation plans for Himalayan black bear in particular. Like currently, we have a population of 5 black bears in the Renukagi mini zoo, and we are also, like ma'am mentioned, we are also trying to provide a more naturalistic look to the enclosures and trying to enrich the particular enclosures with certain artifacts so that their physical fitness is improved. We have also, not very long ago, we have also changed the diet plan to tackle this issue of obesity that was mentioned earlier. So this, we have also got it approved from a chairman society. So these are some of the efforts that we are taking in conservation of black bear itself. And like in case of surplus animals also, we are looking to offset them so that that there is no crowding in the zoo and they can enjoy good facilities in other zoos. So this is also one aspect that we are looking into.
Right, sir. And the next question for you is that considering the altitudinal range distribution of the species, what is the seasonal management plans that are there for the management of the species in focus at your zoo?
Okay, for the Himalayan black bear in particular, seasonally there is a change in the diet plan, as was mentioned by Neema ma'am. There is a slight change in diet for the Himalayan black bears in particular. That is the main management focus as far as seasons are concerned when it comes to the zoos. Yes.
Right, sir. And the last question for you is that in terms of visitor footfalls in your zoo, what is like the main attraction for the children who come and or the visitors who come in?
So I can maybe answer this in a funny way because if you look at Renukagi Mini Zoo, one of the main things, I did not mention it in the presentation, but it is probably the only free zoo in the country. There is no ticketing, so it's a free zoo where visitors can come in and enjoy. And but this is mainly due to the fact that there is a cultural or religious issue centered around the Renukagi Lake. So that is one aspect. And of course, in terms of the experience of the zoo in itself, it is a very unique experience because it is a lakeside zoo, and I am not aware of many lakeside zoos in the country where the zoo path is itself the path around the lake. So that is an attraction in itself. And of course, the fact that there are certain flagship species like the swamp deer or the Himalayan black bear and the common leopard. So this is also one of the main attraction points in Renukagi. Yes.
Right. So thank you so much, sir, for answering the questions. I think those were the questions that we discussed so far for both the talks today. So with this, we come to an end to our week 58 Know Your Species, Know Your Zoo talk. On behalf of the Central Zoo Authority, I would like to thank both Ms. Dr. Neema Nawanjrekar and to you, Mr. Ravi, for taking time out of his schedule and joining us for this talk. I would also like to thank the audience who have been with us through the talk and patient, and we've been listening to, and I hope that it has helped in augmenting your knowledge on the species in focus as well as the zoo in focus. And I would also like to inform that we'll be back next week on Wednesday with a week 59 species, which is the Western tragopan, and the zoo in focus for that is the Sarahan pheasantry. So do tune in for that talk next week from 4 to 5 p.m. And with this, we come to the end of week 58 talk. So namaskar.
Thank you.